The sun rose over Pompeii like it always had. Warm golden light spilled across the rooftops, touched the stone streets, and glimmered against fountains where water still ran fresh. Bakers opened their shops before dawn. Merchants arranged olives, figs, fish sauce, and wine in neat rows. Dogs barked from courtyards. Children chased each other through alleyways while their mothers shouted after them. To anyone looking from afar, it was another ordinary morning in one of the richest cities of the Roman world. No one knew they were waking into history. No one knew the mountain watching over them had already decided their fate. Above the city stood Mount Vesuvius, green slopes, vineyards, quiet beauty. To the people of Pompeii, it was not a monster. It was a backdrop, a landmark, a provider of fertile soil and good harvest. Children played beneath it. Farmers planted along its sides. Lovers walked its paths. It had slept for generations. And because it had been silent so long, they mistook silence for safety. Pompeii was not a village. It was alive with wealth, gossip, ambition, vanity, laughter, and noise. Around 12,000 people lived there, though more passed through daily. Senators owned villas with painted walls and gardens. Freed slaves ran businesses and became rich. Sailors arrived from distant ports. Street vendors sold hot food to workers who could not afford private kitchens. There were bathhouses where men debated politics in steam-filled rooms. There were theaters where actors mocked the powerful. There were brothels, temples, taverns, and markets. Life in Pompeii was Roman life in miniature. If you walked its streets that final morning, you might have seen a baker kneading dough before sunrise, a young couple arguing over money, a wealthy woman selecting jewelry, a tired slave carrying jars of oil, a soldier riding home, a child drawing shapes in dust. Ordinary people living ordinary moments, the kind history rarely records, but Pompeii would preserve them forever. There had been signs. 17 years earlier, a violent earthquake had struck the region. Buildings collapsed, walls cracked, temples crumbled. Repairs were still ongoing in some parts of the city. Even in the days before disaster, smaller tremors shook cups on tables and startled horses in their stalls. But earthquakes were common enough in the region. People adapt to danger when danger becomes familiar. A shaking floor becomes an annoyance. A cracked wall becomes tomorrow's problem. A strange smell in the air becomes nothing worth discussing. This is how humans survive, and sometimes, how they die. The morning of August 24th. The date has been debated by historians, but the terror itself has not. The morning began warm. In a modest house near the city gate, a woman named Julia, fictional, but like many who lived there, prepared bread for her family. Her husband Marcus, a cloth merchant, planned to visit the forum. Their son Lucius begged to skip lessons and watch gladiator practice instead. Across town, an elderly man carefully reopened a damaged wall in his courtyard, still repairing earthquake cracks from years before. At the harbor, sailors checked ropes and cursed gulls. Nothing in the air said death. Then, sometime after midday, the mountain exploded. It began with a sound many survivors would never forget. Not thunder, something deeper, a roar from inside the earth. People looked toward Vesuvius and saw a dark column rising into the sky, towering, swelling, climbing higher and higher. Roman writer Pliny the Younger later described it like a pine tree, a tall trunk of ash branching outward at the top. It was beautiful for a few moments. Then ash began to fall, at first lightly, like gray snow. Children laughed. Some pointed. Curious citizens climbed rooftops for a better view. Then the stones started falling. Pumice, light volcanic rock, rained from the sky, clattering against streets, smashing tiles, bruising shoulders, breaking windows. Curiosity turned to fear. People ran indoors, then they ran back out again, because indoors was no safer. There is a moment in every disaster when people realize normal rules no longer apply. Pompeii reached that moment fast. Mothers screamed for children lost in crowds. Donkeys kicked free of carts. Wealthy men who once walked with servants now shoved through streets like beggars. Priests prayed loudly to gods who did not answer. Some people tried to flee immediately. Others hesitated. Hesitation is powerful. Maybe it will stop. Maybe tomorrow this will pass. Maybe my valuables matter. Maybe home is safer. So they packed jewelry, gathered coins, locked doors, collected documents. Tried to save what cannot be saved when time is ending. Julia grabbed bread, a blanket, and Lucius. Marcus ran back inside for the family savings. He never returned. Ash thickened the air. Breathing became harder. Pumice piled in streets ankle-deep, then knee-deep. Roofs began collapsing under weight. In some homes, families huddled together while ceilings groaned overhead. In others, people sheltered in basements that became traps. Those who fled covered mouths with cloth and moved through darkness at midday. Imagine trying to run while stones fall from the sky. Imagine not knowing where safety is. Imagine hearing thousands of voices all afraid at once. That was Pompeii. Across the bay, witnesses watched the nightmare unfold. Among them was Pliny the Elder, commander of the fleet at Misenum. Curious by nature and brave by reputation, he sailed toward the eruption, not away from it, to investigate and to rescue stranded people. Ash rained onto ships. The sea churned strangely. Shorelines shifted. Still, he advanced. He reached the coast, tried to calm others, and reportedly encouraged those around him even as chaos spread. Later, overcome by fumes or heart failure during the catastrophe, he died there. Some men run from disaster. Some sail into it. As afternoon turned to evening, darkness became total. Not the darkness of sunset. The darkness of burial. Torches flickered weakly in clouds of ash. People stumbled through streets they had known all their lives and no longer recognized. Cries echoed between walls. Some prayed, some cursed the gods, some embraced loved ones and waited. Julia and Lucius reached the edge of town with hundreds of others trying to escape the city gates. But the roads were clogged with carts, animals, debris, and terrified people pushing in every direction. Lucius asked where his father was. Julia had no answer. Centuries later, archaeologists would find bodies in positions that still speak. A mother shielding a child, a group clasping hands, a man covering his face, people carrying keys, people carrying money. One dog chained in a courtyard, twisting desperately as ash rose around it. These details matter because history often speaks in emperors and wars. Pompeii speaks in human gestures. In the final moments, status vanished. There were no senators in ash, no slaves in ash, no rich or poor in ash, only people. Many in Pompeii survived the first fall of pumice. The true killer came later, during the night and early morning. Scorching pyroclastic surges, fast-moving clouds of superheated gas, ash, and debris raced down the slopes of Vesuvius. They moved with terrifying speed, too fast to outrun, too hot to survive, too sudden to understand. When one of these surges reached Pompeii, it ended the city. Some victims likely died instantly from heat shock and suffocation. There was no final speech, no dramatic last stand, only a wall of death sweeping through streets where bread still sat in ovens. Then, silence. No market noise, no footsteps, no barking dogs, no bargaining in the forum, no laughter from taverns. Just ash settling over everything. Pompeii disappeared beneath meters of volcanic debris. Roofs collapsed. Streets vanished. Gardens buried. Frescoes sealed. Bodies covered where they fell. Nearby, Herculaneum suffered too, struck by even more intense surges. An entire region was transformed in less than 2 days. The mountain stood quiet again, as if nothing had happened. In the weeks after, survivors returned carefully. They searched for relatives. They dug for valuables. They stared at a landscape they no longer recognized. Where had the street gone? Where had the temple stood? Where was the bakery? Where was home? Some found walls. Some found bodies. Most found nothing, because the city itself had been swallowed. Grief is heavy. Ash is heavier. Time moved on. Rome had wars to fight, taxes to collect, roads to maintain. New disasters replaced old ones. Generations passed. The exact location of Pompeii faded. Fields covered ruins. Vines grew. Farmers plowed over buried villas without knowing what lay beneath. A city once crowded with life became rumor under dirt. And there it might have remained forever. In the 18th century, excavations began uncovering streets, walls, statues, and homes astonishingly preserved. Then came one of archaeology's most haunting innovations. Voids were discovered in hardened ash, where bodies had decomposed. Researchers poured plaster into these empty spaces. When the ash was removed, forms appeared. Faces, hands, expressions, the final shapes of people caught in time. Pompeii was not just ruins. It was a paused moment. A city interrupted. We know names from graffiti and inscriptions. We know what people ate from carbonized bread and seeds. We know what they joked about from wall scribbles. We know what they feared, worshipped, desired, and sold. One election slogan painted on a wall. A complaint about bad wine. a love note, a crude joke. Pompeii reminds us that ancient people were not distant statues. They were alive exactly as we are alive. Busy, flawed, hopeful, distracted, thinking tomorrow was guaranteed. Julia and Lucius are imagined, but people like them were real. Perhaps they escaped. Many did. Perhaps Marcus never came back because he was trapped searching for coins that no longer mattered. Perhaps Lucius grew old somewhere else, telling grandchildren about the day the sky fell. History leaves gaps. Stories help us feel them, because Pompeii is not only about death, it is about normal life meeting sudden change. A reminder that catastrophe rarely announces itself clearly. People still say, "I'll fix it later. I'll call tomorrow. I'll spend more time with family next month. I'll rest after this season ends. I'll appreciate life once things calm down." Pompeii whispers across 2,000 years. There may be no later. Mount Vesuvius still stands near modern Naples. Millions live in its shadow. It is studied carefully now, monitored, measured, but mountains do not read instruments. They keep their own time. It buried homes, it buried streets, it buried wealth, it buried bodies. But it could not bury memory. Pompeii became one of the clearest windows into the ancient world ever found. Through tragedy, it preserved daily life more vividly than any triumphal monument. Not emperors on horseback, not speeches in marble halls, but kitchens, bedrooms, graffiti, bread ovens, garden walls. The world remembered Rome through ruins. It remembered Pompeii through people. On the last morning of Pompeii, someone kissed a spouse goodbye without knowing it was the last time. Someone delayed a trip. Someone worried about money. Someone planned dinner. Someone dreamed about next year. Then ash fell. That is why the story endures, because beneath the togas and temples, beneath the Latin names and ancient stones, Pompeii is us. Busy in the sunlight, ignoring the mountain, certain there will be another morning. The city died in a day, but its warning has lasted 2,000 years.